I used to think that the phrase living well is the best revenge was just a comforting lie, something people said to make themselves feel better when they got walked all over. But a few years ago, my old landlord proved to me that sometimes revenge isn't just about living well. Sometimes it's about buying the entire building out from under the person who tried to ruin you. Let me set the scene. I was the dream tenant. I paid my rent 5 days early every month. I kept the place immaculate. When a pipe leaked or a cabinet door came loose, I didn't badger management. I just fixed it myself and kept the receipts. I spent 3 years in that apartment, treating it like it was my own home. My landlord, Richard, was a textbook slumlord. He was distant, incredibly cheap, and had this unearned aura of absolute arrogance. He only showed up when it was time to raise the rent, which he did like clockwork every single year. Eventually, I saved up enough money for a down payment on a place of my own, so I gave my 60 days notice. I spent the final weekend scrubbing that apartment until it literally sparkled. I'm talking toothboards on the baseboards, bleaching the grout, washing the inside of the oven. I knew Richard was a snake, so before I locked the door for the last time, I took a slow, continuous 20-minute video recording of every single square inch of the apartment. Holding up that day's newspaper at the beginning to prove the date, I handed over the keys, expecting my $2,500 security deposit back in full. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Richard. There was no check. Instead, it was a scathing, multi-page letter claiming that I had absolutely destroyed the place. He attached a completely fabricated list of damages. He claimed the walls needed total drywall replacement, and he charged me thousands of dollars to replace carpets that didn't even exist. The apartment had hardwood floors. Not only was he keeping my $2,500, but he was also demanding that I send him an additional $1,500 within 10 days, or he would take me to court and ruin my credit. I was furious. I emailed him back immediately with screenshots from my move-out video showing the pristine hardwood floors and the spotless walls. His response was short, smug, and completely dismissive. He wrote, "Videos can be faked or edited. I have line item receipts from my contractors. Pay the $1,500 or I'll see you in court. Go ahead and sue me if you think you can afford it." He knew exactly what he was doing. He figured a legal battle would cost me more time and money than the deposit was worth, and that I would just fold. He thought he had won. But I didn't get mad. I decided to get smart. I started digging. I wanted to prepare for small claims court, so I went down to the county records office to pull up public documents on the property. I wanted to see if he had a history of code violations or legal disputes with other tenants. But as I started scrolling through the tax history and the title documents, I stumbled across a massive, glaring red flag. Richard hadn't paid property taxes on the building in almost a year, and it got worse. I pulled up the lien records and realized he hadn't paid the mortgage on the building in 9 months either. That's when the pieces started clicking together. Richard wasn't just a cheap slumlord. He was actively pocketing the rent checks from every single tenant in our 6-unit building, completely ignoring the bank in the city and letting the property slide straight into foreclosure. He was planning to milk the building for every cent he could get, pull off his security deposit scam on anyone who left, and then run away right before the bank officially seized it. I immediately reached out to the other tenants in the building. We all got together for drinks, and sure enough, 2 people who had moved out the previous year told me Richard had done the exact same thing to them. He stole their deposits, threatened them with fake legal fees, and they just gave up because they couldn't afford a lawyer. I realized small claims court was too small for what Richard deserved. It was time to drop the hammer. I gathered all my evidence, the tax delinquencies, the mortgage defaults, and the patterns of security deposit fraud from multiple tenants. I packaged it all up and sent it directly to the fraud department of the bank holding his mortgage, as well as the county tax assessor. I explicitly pointed out that he was collecting thousands of dollars in monthly rent while intentionally forcing the property into default. The bank did not take kindly to this. Hearing that a landlord is actively draining an asset they are about to foreclose on causes banks to move very, very fast. They accelerated the foreclosure process immediately, bypassing the usual extensions and bureaucratic delays. Because I had been saving for a house down payment anyway, I had a decent chunk of cash sitting in a high-yield savings account. I started watching the local foreclosure auction listings like a hawk. A few months later, the building was officially scheduled for a public sheriff's sale at the county courthouse. On the day of the auction, I showed up with a certified cashier's check. Because the building had some deferred maintenance that Richard had ignored, and because the real estate market was in a bit of a weird lull that week, there was almost no corporate interest. A couple of local investors made some lowball offers, but I outbid them. When the gavel fell, I had done it. I bought the entire 6-unit apartment building for pennies on the dollar. But the best part was yet to come. Richard was so checked out and so arrogant that he didn't even realize the foreclosure auction had actually finalized. He thought he still had a few weeks left to skim the rent. The following Tuesday was the first of the month. I knew Richard always came by in person around noon to collect the physical rent checks from the older tenants who didn't use online banking. I drove over to my new property and waited in the parking lot. Right on cue, Richard pulled up in his luxury SUV, looking as smug as ever. He stepped out of his car, saw me standing by the entrance, and his face instantly twisted into a scowl. He marched right up to me and started shouting. He demanded to know what the hell I was doing there, told me I was trespassing, and threatened to call the police to have me arrested. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a certified copy of the newly minted deed to the property, and handed it to him. He sneered, looked down at the paperwork, and I watched the color completely drain from his face in real time. His jaw literally dropped. He looked at the paper, then looked at me, then back at the paper. I calmly looked him in the eye and said, "Actually, Richard, I own this building now." "You don't? That means you are currently trespassing on my property. Get in your car and leave before I call the cops myself. Oh, and by the way, you still owe me $2,500. The aftermath was poetry. Richard's financial house of cards completely collapsed. The bank went after his other assets, he was forced to declare bankruptcy, and because of the paper trail I had handed over to the city, the state attorney general's office opened an investigation into his rental practices. He was legally mandated to pay back the stolen deposits to every tenant he had scammed over the past 3 years. As for me, I became the landlord, but I chose to do things a little differently. I held a meeting with the remaining tenants that night, introduced myself as the new owner, and told them their rent was being reduced by 10% across the board, effective immediately, just because I could. I went from being a cheated tenant to a property owner, all because a greedy man couldn't resist trying to steal $2,500 from the wrong guy.